We're going to talk a bit about what's been going on in the rest of the world of sport with Nathan in just a couple of minutes' time. But first I want to play you this. Here's Kieran Cunningham talking about what David Brady's been up to over the last while on the pay-per-view yesterday with Joe.
You obviously know David very well, Joe. And he said it's good. Like, there's a Raymond Carver short story called A Small Good Thing. And that line is often used I see in sports articles. And this is a good thing, but it's far from small. Like, it's a really big deal what he's done, and the movement in a way that he's kind of sparked, because a lot of people have, the Monaghan players, footballers have got involved, some GA people in Wicklow, Johnny Doyle, Kildare, Owen Liston said a lot, himself and a few of the legendary Kerry players he played with, they've started doing it. He talked to one guy who was a Clare man living in Galway who loved Henry Shefflin, and Henry rang him up, rang this guy up. So, and Michael D. Higgins, the president, has got in touch with David Brady and thanked him for this. And if you factor in the time, you don't have short conversations with David Brady, as he points out there. The minimum, 15 minutes is how are you to David? So he's devoting, to me, it looks like 3 or 4 hours a day to this. So, and it's unpaid and it's voluntary, and it's really helping people, and fair play to him.
Yeah, no, I think we all echo that as well. We've had DB on the show talking about it just as he was kicking this whole thing off, so we might get him on again over the next while to see how it's been going and get some more of those great stories from him. Nathan, sport is back, the Bundesliga and the golf last night. Let's start with the Bundesliga. Were you fulfilled? Were you not entertained?
It passed the Saturday afternoon, I think, watching Borussia Dortmund and Schalke. It was a strange experience, probably putting a bit too much pressure on it to replicate what we had experienced 3 or 4 months ago, watching a league that we don't always watch and probably aren't massively invested in. And while it's a big derby from a German point of view, I suppose you're just watching to see what it's like. I've commentated on games behind closed doors before, and it is a slightly surreal experience. The football was of a good quality. I think Borussia Dortmund, after the first 20 minutes, once they warmed up into it, were brilliant and destroyed Schalke. But it'll take a bit of getting used to. And I think that's the thing. People are writing this off already, saying, well, actually, you know what? No football is better than this type of football. But this is going to be what we're going to see for possibly the next year. The Premier League are very much talking about no supporters at games next season either. So it's the first one. Of course it's going to be unusual. Some people are watching 9-10 games a week at this stage on television at packed stadiums. So to watch them without anybody there, it's always going to be strange. But give it a couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the valid point there is it's hard to know what it would be like if you were invested in it. If that was a Liverpool fan sitting at home watching Liverpool score 4 goals against a bottom half Premier League team, I think the Liverpool fan sitting at home is clapping and cheering and getting up off their couch as they normally would. I don't think the lack of fans affects the ecstasy you get off being an armchair fan whatsoever. I think it definitely affects the passive play when there's a dead moment, when you can really notice the atmosphere. But when you're watching that Dortmund team bear down on Schalke, certainly speaking from my sense of things, it was just as if it was normal, because you're totally focused on what is going to happen here. It is the suspense that we've been sorely missing, which I think having that back is more important than any atmosphere that you can possibly get through your television set.
Well, Tuesday week will be interesting because that's Bayern Munich against Borussia Dortmund. So this is a game that really does matter. It'll probably decide the title in the Bundesliga. And even the players, it seems, on Saturday were a little bit unsure. Understandably, at times it seemed as though players were maybe standing off tackles a little bit more. You'd have to assume that they're going to get into the run of this very, very quickly, considering how games are going to come thick and fast for them. But a game like Bayern-Borussia, when's there going to be a little bit of a scrap? When's there going to be a little bit of pushing and shoving? I think, does that return, or is that now actually players are thinking, well, I'm going to, as annoyed as I am, I'm just going to take a step back here because it's just not worth the risk. But I definitely think, people are writing this off too soon. As you say, a Liverpool-Manchester City game is probably, I think, 2nd or 3rd on the list when the Premier League does return. Let's see that. And also, let's see how we get used to not having supporters. I think it's interesting from a commentary point of view as to whether commentary evolves around this, because generally the view on television commentary is that the less the commentator says, the better. The pictures do the talking. Whereas, and I love somebody like Martin Tyler, who even in the biggest games, at times for a big goal, doesn't start roaring and shouting. Not every goal is the Aguero last minute of the season for Martin Tyler. He can just describe it brilliantly as part of the flow of the game. When there's no supporters there, and especially when people are sort of second screening all the time, you kind of need the commentator to get excited when the ball goes into the final third to make sure you're watching, to make sure, much like
Tune
radio,
back
to
in,
grab
everybody.
your attention. Well, I know you could say, well, listen, you should sit down and watch the 90 minutes and not be distracted. But people don't do that.
No.
So I wonder, will the commentary change to more radio-like commentary where you are trying to grab people's attention? Because I think that was something that stood out for me. I think they did a brilliant job. And we Paul Dempsey on Thursday night show, and he's based in Wicklow at the moment. Like, whatever about doing an off-tube commentary, doing it with a co-commentator who's not even in the same country as you, commenting on a game in a third country, is incredibly difficult. And I saw a story that a Tesco delivery driver rocked up at Paul Dempsey's door in the middle of the match, which made his life a little bit more difficult as well. These are the things that people just don't account for.
Well, the thing is that obviously with new innovations and a little bit more access across different sports over the next couple of weeks, there will be almost a reversal of that entirely as well, though, where the commentator will have to shut up again. Like, there was definitely times last night watching the golf where I was like, hold on a minute there, I just want to hear what Rory's saying. Like, what is the exact bit of conversation they're having? Like, if you had that sort of element in football, I don't know if it's mic'd up on the sideline managers or something like that, that is when the commentator can just stay stum and actually listen to what is being said. I think there needs to be almost other creative ways of making it an interesting listen and keeping that attention from the audience.
Yeah, maybe they come up with that. Like, maybe, I don't think anybody thinks they want noise to be funneled through.
Do they not?
But maybe you try it out. Maybe you try it out for a couple of matches.
I think it works, Nathan.
If there was fake crowd noise.
Yeah, why not? I think we're like,
possibly.
It has to be on the table. Like the NFL have said it's a done deal. If there's no fans, there's going to be crowd noise pumped in, and you can see exactly. It's a much easier thing to do. It's third down. You play the noise from the last time these two teams played when it was third down. Or it's, there are very set. There's been a touchdown. You play the music, and it's like the crowd goes wild. So it's not the same. Obviously, there's a bad tackle. You can't have everybody. You can't have the pre-recorded, the referees, whatever being chanted. But maybe you can. Maybe we have to reach that point in 6 months.
It's a new career opportunity for somebody.
Well, it's a massive business.
You've got a bank of 80 different sound effects, and you got to be the guy who picks the right one at the right time.
Yeah, or like there's a different team of people who are, okay, you're our negative crowd, you're our positive crowd, you're our positive goal crowd. Like, when you start thinking about it, it's pretty easy to break down. And there's probably an algorithm that eventually becomes a bit of AI around the whole thing. And this moves very quickly to a point where, so we've been having this conversation. Would you be happy to put a pair of glasses on in your living room and be transported to be sitting in the stadium? You probably would. Right now, you definitely would, right?
Would you have as good a view of the game? Like, do you get the instant replays?
Oh, you can...
Do you get all the different angles?
Yeah, you get a 360-degree...
From your seat?
From your seat. And what's more, there's a microphone, so when you're shouting, it's coming out.
Okay, well, that I think is a bit of a game changer. Yeah, I would definitely be in favour of experimenting with the crowd noise. Even when they play the music after the goals, it just seems to fill the stadium a little bit more and makes it that bit more realistic. So 100%, I don't see why, if the technology's there, why they wouldn't experiment. And maybe by the time a new season comes around, obviously it's all been a bit of a rush to get this restarted.
Yeah. 087 918 180 is the WhatsApp number here if anybody wants to get in touch with us. What about McIlroy in the golf and Donald Trump sleazing his way into the whole thing?
I'm just surprised people were surprised by this, by any aspect of this. So we had a bit of a preview last year with Tiger and Phil and the match, which could have been a brilliant spectacle. Two of the greatest golfers of all time, spending 3-4 hours in each other's company and just stunk the joint out. They barely spoke for the vast majority of the 18 holes. And I thought they might have learned a lot of lessons last night. Firstly, in terms of how to produce this. So you say to Rory McIlroy and Dustin Johnson and Fowler maybe that you're essentially the presenters of this. Here's a list of 10 things. Maybe one for each hole that you could talk about. Ask Dustin Johnson about blowing a major. Ask Rory about a dip in form over the last couple of years. And that sustains you for 10 minutes. What we had was Rory doing a little bit of uninteresting talking. And that was kind of it. And it's really hard to expect a huge amount else from the players. If you mic'd up any 4-ball in the world and you told them that it was on mic, are people really going to act normally? I don't think so. The golf didn't feel like again, the whole premise of this charity is up against this charity to win more money makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Obviously, it's all for a good cause, essentially. But even still, the fact it goes to the 19th. Again, much like Tiger and Phil also went to an extra hole. And they basically had to make up an extra hole in Tiger and Phil for a 19th to decide it. And again, the last night, we're going to an extra hole. Let's do some sort of closest to pin challenge. Like, come on. Surely for a made-for-TV event, it can be a little bit more dramatic. And all of that's even before Trump comes into it. I just couldn't believe that you have Rory, this brilliant opportunity, probably the most interesting person by far in golf, and that they didn't plan it out with him in some way to get the best of that.
I think Rory deserves credit for being the uninteresting talking guy, because at least he was the guy who was talking, and like he threw in bit of bad trash talk, but it was still trash talk, and it was, outside of Trump, the most interesting.
What did he do? So not everybody will have seen. Most people have not seen this. What did he do?
So to that Wolf kid, he's like, it's amazing how rich I've got off golf, $25 million in the FedEx Cup, and basically just rattling the cash in his pocket at this poor 21-year-old kid, poor not in the literal sense, but kind of a guy you'd feel a little bit sorry for when Rory McIlroy is doing that. Like, that's the sort of stuff they should be encouraged to do, and of course that could have really bad consequences where everything just comes across as really cringy, like the Tiger Phil pre-match waffle before their head-to-head was absolutely awful. But Rory McIlroy might be able to pull it off. Rory versus Brooks Koepka is trash talk that I would watch if they were encouraged to do so, for example.
There's a big prize, though. You make a very good point about there's a big prize for McIlroy to become like somebody. If this sport ends up not getting back the way, or if there's a second wave where they can't have tournaments, and like you could have this every week where Rory McIlroy hosts somebody, and it's his thing, and it's his pay-per-view, and suddenly the value of that becomes huge. Even his value as a communicator into the second part of his grown-up career, when the golf comes off the heat that it is at the moment, and he becomes just another player in the field. Like, the opportunity to be his generation's Jack Nicklaus, the biggest businessman in the sport, is right there for him if he wants it, and this is probably an opportunity for him as well. Just one quick point about Mike Tirico. I don't want to let this pass, because he was halfway through an interesting question with Donald Trump about Rory McIlroy changing his mind and saying that he wouldn't play with Trump again before he bottled the question and said, do they talk to you about politics, sir? And Trump goes, yeah, you'd be surprised. A lot of them really like my politics. I'm not surprised at all. I think Trump was telling the truth 100%, that most of the golfers who play with him are absolute lickspittles who are like, oh, Mr. Trump, your politics are amazing. That tax cut that you gave us was absolutely sensational. I'm even way richer now than I was before, and I was very rich before Mr. Trump, so I love playing golf with you. And then the last bit I thought was interesting was, it turns out Trump and Tirico are golf buddies, and they've played golf before, so there was no journalistic independence there. Mike Tirico has played golf with the president, and apparently Trump threw his ball into a greenside bunker. But there was no sense of revenge. There was like a very, very supine interview from Tirico when he had the chance right there to go, this guy has disowned you this week.
It was clearly a party political broadcast. Even Trump, who came on the line and seems to have a genuine love of golf, maybe because of the opportunities and cheating it affords him, but at times was almost going down the line of talking about his interest in golf, and then remembered actually he'd been put up to this so that he could get the message out to his community, and the golfing community is very much a Trump community. It's a shame, because you thought this was such an opportunity to bring up what Rory had said, and like Shane Ryan, who's on Golf Weekly, tweeted that Rory said he probably wouldn't play golf with Trump again, and then said some slightly stronger stuff. Made the point that a golfer saying he probably wouldn't play golf with Trump is the equivalent of another athlete giving a press conference wearing a Che Guevara beret, holding an AR-15 and declaring revolution beneath a portrait of Chairman Mao. Like, golfers do not speak up against Donald Trump, mostly because the vast majority don't have an issue. And it was the one thing, I think we were all critical at the time of Rory playing with Trump, and wondered would eventually he come to regret it. And he was very, very strong last week in knowing, I'm sure, the potential of a backlash, considering who you're dealing with, and considering you'd have to expect at some stage somebody will question Trump about this, because I'd imagine he'll try and put himself front and center at a lot of golf events over the next little while, that Trump may come at him with both barrels. And for the golfing fraternity and sponsors, who are very much on the Republican side of things, that it may not have been the wisest move. So I think while it may seem from this side of the water is the obvious thing to say, from a golfer's point of view, I think it was a very brave thing for Rory to go out and say. And there is a big opportunity for him now because he's, without question, the most interesting figure in golf. It'll be fascinating to see how that develops and how he wants to go with that. That's why I thought, maybe you throw Harrington into the mix for something like this, who just talks and talks and talks. But you need brilliant producers to force the players to talk about certain topics. You can't just leave it up to themselves.
Well, you can make
Dustin Johnson.
You can give them a metaphorical conscience. Say, this hole is your hole, you're in charge, and you're going to talk about this. And then the next hole, it's somebody else, and you're in charge. And you just rotate it. There's loads of ways you can do it. And look, first time out, not bad. Obviously fairly disgraceful, the interview with Trump. But other than that, not bad.
Well, Tiger Phil are back out next week.
Oh, yeah.
With Tom Brady and Peyton Manning.
Oh, yeah. That could be weird.
So let's see if they have.
That's going to be weird. Tom Brady is weird. That's going to be great to watch.